Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program Focal Point, the network, the American Family Radio Talk Network. If you'd like to join our conversation about Bo Bergdahl and this prisoner swap, 888-589-8840 is the number to call, 888-589-8840. Now, one of the takeaways, I mean, everything is wrong with this. I mean, I don't even know where to begin talking about everything that is wrong with this situation with Bo Bergdahl. The guy's not a war hero. He is a deserter. He deserves a court-martial. If you desert on the field of battle, that's a death penalty offense under the UCMJ. Minimum he's facing right now, ought to be facing, is 5 years in prison and up to possible death sentence for deserting on the field of battle, shirking your duty, deserting in such a way that you're avoiding responsibility, and that's exactly what he did. So minimum, he's looking at 5 years because we never really officially declared war against the Taliban. Do you know, even till today, the Taliban is not classified as a terrorist organization. It's amazing to me. We haven't even classified the Taliban officially as a terrorist organization. So because there was no official war declared, he probably couldn't be prosecuted under a death penalty charge. But a minimum of 5 years in prison is what he ought to be looking at. He deserves a court-martial and not a hero's welcome, which is what he's going to get in the state of Idaho. Now, part of the problem is that what President Obama has done here is endanger the lives of every soldier, endanger the lives, frankly, of every American civilian anywhere in the world, because the signal that Obama has sent is we will negotiate with terrorists. We will deal with terrorists. You get a hostage, we will trade you some really bad guys for the hostages that you have. And this is what Ted Cruz said to George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos asks Ted Cruz, clip 8, about his reaction to the Bergdahl deal, and here's what he had to say.
First, let's get your reaction to the Bergdahl deal.
Well, look, all of us celebrate with Sergeant Bergdahl, with his family. I mean, looking at his parents there, I mean, that's powerful. At the same time, the terms of the deal are very troubling.
Why?
Well, for one thing, how many soldiers lost their lives to capture those 5 Taliban terrorists that we just released? You know, Ambassador Rice basically said to you, yes, U.S. policy has changed. Now we make deals with terrorists. And the question going forward is have we just put a price on other U.S. soldiers? What does this tell terrorists? That if you capture a U.S. soldier, you can trade that soldier for 5 terrorists we've gone after?
So
that's a very dangerous precedent.
If you were president, you wouldn't have negotiated?
I do not think the way to deal with terrorists is through releasing other violent terrorists. I mean,
but what if that's the only way to get Bergdahl home?
It's not the only way. We can go in and use military force as needed to rescue our fallen compatriots. But
So Ted Cruz says, look, that's not the only way to get this guy back. Now, here's what's weird is our military knew where he was. They knew where he was. They could have gone and got him using force, a rescue operation, an insertion team. We took out bin Laden. We can go retrieve a soldier that's a hostage. And you step back a second. Look, this guy was a deserter. I mean, you can have sympathy for the situation he's in. I mean, we wouldn't want anybody to be in that situation where he's basically restrained by the Taliban. Who would want that for anybody? So we don't like that for anyone. We hate that anybody would be in the clutches of the Taliban. So say, okay, here's a guy that's in the clutches of the Taliban. This is terrible. This is a horrible place for anybody to be. Whose fault is this? You see where I'm getting? You can have sympathy for the guy. You can feel for him because you can say, man, I wouldn't want anybody to be in that place. And then the next question you got to ask, okay, who do we blame for this? If this is a terrible, terrible set of circumstances, who's at fault for this? And you think about it, and the only one you can blame is Bo Bergdahl himself. This is his doing. So, yeah, you can feel sympathy for him, but then you have to turn right around and say, look, he's at fault. He's simply getting what his own actions have brought about. And this guy was not simply a deserter. He actually aided and abetted the Taliban. I'm trying to see if I can find the exact story here. But he actually, with the Taliban, he showed them how to convert a cell phone into a remote detonator, and he showed them how to set ambushes for American soldiers. So he aided them and he abetted them. He says, look, if you want to blow up some American soldiers, I can show you how to rig a cell phone so you can use a cell phone to blow up my American soldiers from whom I have just deserted. And I will show you how to set ambushes for American soldiers. Now, the Taliban guy said, look, a lot of that stuff we already knew. We already knew a lot of that stuff. But what he means by that is we didn't know everything. So Bo Bergdahl was actually cooperating with, aiding and abetting the enemy. That's not just desertion, ladies and gentlemen. That is treason. And treason is a capital crime in the Constitution. Now, back to this business about Bergdahl being a deserter. The truth is, Bergdahl was a deserter. This is Nathan Bradley Bethea, remember, who was there at the time. Bergdahl was a deserter, and soldiers from his own unit died trying to track him down. On the night prior to his capture, Bergdahl pulled guard duty at a small outpost about 2 hours south of the provincial capital. The base resembled a wagon circle of armored vehicles with some razor wire strung around them. A guard tower sat high up on a nearby hill, but the outpost itself was no fortress. Besides the tower, the only hard structure that I saw in July of 2009 was a plywood shelter filled with bottled water. Soldiers either slept in poncho tents or inside their vehicles. The next morning, now remember, before this, I don't know if you had heard this, but Bergdahl, before this day came, he had written his family saying, look, he was completely disillusioned with the American mission in Afghanistan. He thought America was disgusting, I think was his word. Everything about America was disgusting. He said, I am ashamed to be an American. That's what he said, and then he walked away from his post. He deserted his comrades. The next morning, Bergdahl failed to show up for morning roll call. The soldiers in 2nd Platoon Blackfoot Company discovered his rifle, helmet, body armor, and web gear in a neat stack. He had, however, taken his compass. His fellow soldiers later mentioned his stated desire to walk from Afghanistan to India. Make no mistake, Bergdahl did not lag behind on a patrol, as was cited in news reports at the time. There was no patrol that night. Bergdahl was relieved from guard duty, and instead of going to sleep, he fled the outpost on foot. He deserted. His disappearance translated into daily search missions across the entire Afghanistan theater of operations, particularly ours. The combat platoons in our battalion spent the next month on daily helicopter insertion search missions called air assaults, trying to scour villages for signs of him. Each operation would send multiple platoons and every enabler available in pursuit: radio intercept teams, military working dogs, professional anthropologists used as intelligence gathering teams, Afghan sources in disguise. They would be out for at least 24 hours. I know of some who were on mission for 10 days at a stretch. In July, the temperature was well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit each day. Now remember, this is when they didn't know what had happened to him. They didn't have all the information. They didn't know at this point that he was a deserter. They didn't know at this point that he was teaching the Taliban how to turn cell phone weapons into detonators for bombs. Didn't know that he was teaching them how to set ambushes to kill them. Didn't know that at this point. They just know a soldier's missing. Their job is to try to find him. These cobbled together units' task was to search villages one after another. They often took rifle and mortar fire from insurgents or perhaps just angry locals. It was hard, dirty, and dangerous work. The searches enraged the local civilian population and derailed the counterinsurgency operations taking place at the time. So realize what he's saying here. He's saying, look, what Bo Bergdahl did not just endanger the members of his platoon and division and whatever, but it also compromised the mission that we were there to carry out. The military could not carry out its mission because so many resources had to be diverted to try to find him, to try to track him down. So he compromised the mission of the United States military, the counterinsurgency operations that were taking place at the time. On July 4, 2009, this is just now 5 days after he deserted, a human wave of insurgents attacked the joint U.S.-Afghan outpost at Xerox, 2 Americans died and many more received wounds. One of my close friends was the company executive officer for the unit at Xerox. In his opinion, the attack would not have happened had his company received its normal complement of intelligence aircraft, drones, planes, and the like. Instead, every intelligence aircraft available in theater had received new instructions: find Bergdahl. My friend blames Bergdahl for his soldiers' deaths. His soldiers' names were Private First Class Aaron Fairbairn and Private First Class Justin Casillas. Through the 2009 Afghan presidential election slowed the search for Bergdahl, though it did not stop it. Our battalion suffered 6 fatalities in a 3-week period, all trying to retrieve Bo Bergdahl. For the veterans of the units that lost these men, Bergdahl's capture and the subsequent hunt for him will forever tie to their memories and to a time in their lives that will define them as people. He has finally returned. Those men will never have the opportunity. And then this soldier says, I believe that Bergdahl also deserves sympathy, but he has much to answer for, some of which is far more damning than simply having walked off. Many have suffered because of his actions, his fellow soldiers, their families, his family, the Afghan military, the unaffiliated Afghan civilians in Paktika, and none of this suffering was inevitable. None of it had to happen. So in sum, Bo Bergdahl was a deserter, not a war hero. He deserves a court-martial and not a hero's parade. We'll be back after the news. Those of you that called, hang on. We'll start taking calls coming right out of the news break. You listen to Focal Point on AFR Talk. Stay with us. We'll be back after this news break.